if there's some things we can take care of today, we don't just keep pushing things off to another time, because in a moment Jesus could return, and then it'll be too late to finish up those things that God had wanted us to do in our lifetime.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host. And joined to help take our leadership to the next level, we have Richard Blackaby.
Glad to be with you today, Sam.
Well, I think we have reached perhaps the final episode.
The end has come.
The end has come in our series, our mini-series here on leading in the end times. And,
the epic mini-series.
Epic, yes.
Yeah.
The extra long 4-part series. So if you haven't listened to the previous 3 episodes, we encourage you to go back and take a look at those. And it's really been, for me, it's been just a great reminder of how to engage with Scripture, especially on difficult issues. Mm-hmm. And, eschatology, the study of the end times, that's certainly one of those that I think can be really tricky. I think a lot of people have been tripped up by it. I think it's sort of it's a pet interest, I think, for a lot of Christians as well, is that, you can get into all the different details. And I think in some ways people can even become obsessed with it to an unhealthy degree.
Yeah.
You see a lot of people who just kind of, that becomes their thing. And I think maybe it plays to the human, perhaps inclination to try and find secret knowledge, or there's all these mysteries surrounding it, and
it seemed like a puzzle. It's like I'm gonna unlock the code and figure this out. And for 2,000 years, people have been trying to, and that's fine to give some attention to that, but there's lots of things in the Bible that are much more clear and straightforward that you can practice today. And sometimes we don't lean into that, where we could be more sanctified today.
Exactly.
Instead, we want to have the solve the mysteries of the end of the age. And so, it is part of Scripture, so it's good to know. And as we've said, when you have a sense of the last times, there is a certain way I think that affects how you lead, and as well. And hopefully there is a sense of urgency. I think that's partly why the disciples turned the world upside down in the first century, was that they did have a sense of urgency, that they did feel like Christ's return was imminent, and so they didn't have time to waste. And although 2,000 years has passed, I think that still would do us well, and to realize we're 2,000 years closer now to Jesus' return. So it certainly is far more imminent than it was when Peter and Paul were still walking on the earth.
Yeah, and I think that's just a great reminder for us today. So, if you haven't listened to the first 3 episodes, I'd encourage you to go back, and we are really just diving into Matthew chapter 24 and walking through that. And so we'll just pick up where we left off last week, Richard.
Sure. Well, we finished up in verse 28 last week, and verse 27 just says, "For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." And so Jesus said when he does return, it will be very clear worldwide that across the skies, from east to west, it'll be very obvious that Jesus is returning. There'll be nothing secret about this particular return. And as we saw last week, Jesus doesn't mention, at least not so far, a secret rapture. When he talks about his return, he talks about it as being very obvious, and trumpet sounding and so on. So we get to verse 29, and it says, "Immediately after the distress of those days." And the thing about that is that Jesus indicated that one of the signs that the end times are near is that there will be distress, there will be turmoil, there'll be wars, rumors of wars, and so on. There'll be false prophets, and so one of the theological strands in Christendom is to say that at some point in the distress, that will God? I mean, the big question is, will God leave Christians on earth right through all the distress? And at least at this point, Jesus never gives any indication that it won't, that he won't, that he'll. It sounds like things are going to just get worse and worse, and on a greater and greater scale, greater and greater frequency, and then we'll get to the end. And so it says immediately, verse 29, after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not shed its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn. And so if you read apocalyptic literature, which would be parts of the book of Daniel, Ezekiel, certainly Revelation, Zechariah in some places, there seems to be this sense in which one of the signs that we're nearing the end is that there will be kind of cataclysmic, worldwide things like stars falling from the sky, or the sun turning dark, the moon turning to blood, or whatever. And it just means that in nature there'll be signs. Things will be happening in nature that we've never seen before. And so, in part, I think you don't necessarily take that all completely literally. It's a form of literature that just indicates that some things are happening that have never been seen before. Some things in nature, in the cosmos, that is massive, and everyone on Earth notices it. And so it says that the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, the stars will fall from the sky. So there, all of that can happen in some. I'm not saying that none of that won't happen, but it typically is just saying that there'll be some things happening that captures everybody's attention. And so when you see things that, not necessarily like a Halley's Comet that comes by every 90 years or however long that is, but it'll be something that hasn't been seen before. And it'll be a natural, and you can say, well, this is a natural phenomenon, but and yet Jesus says, but it will be a sign. And then it says, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And of course, we wish Jesus had explained what that sign would be. It just says that there'll be something that will happen in the sky that will be a sign of the Son of Man. And of course, that is a mystery. It's like, is there something that's going to happen that everybody, at least Christians, identify and say, okay, that must be the sign that Jesus was talking about. But as often happens is he doesn't explain what it is. He just says there will be something in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So it could well be that the sign is Jesus' return, that the sign is, just as Jesus ascended to heaven, that he will return from heaven as well. And he may, the Bible seems to indicate that we'll be all taken up, raptured up, if you will, when the Son of Man returns, when Jesus returns. And so it says he'll be coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So that may well, I sort of tend to interpret it that way, to say all these cosmic things will be happening, things will be kind of coming to a climax, and then the sign will be that Jesus will return. And if you remember in Acts chapter 1, when Jesus ascended to heaven, the disciples and people were all standing there gazing into heaven where Jesus had ascended to, and then an angel asked them, like, why are you looking up into heaven? He's gone, but he'll come back the same way. And so the Bible seems to indicate that in some manner like that, when Jesus comes back, it'll be in the sky in some way, and it'll be obvious to people. And it says he'll be coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. So pretty spectacular when you try to even imagine what that might be like. It's, of course, heaven, the spirit world will invade the physical world, and we will be taken into some kind of spiritual world, and that loud trumpet will sound. And of course, it may be some kind of heavenly trumpet, or just some kind of course, when a trumpet was sounded, you would sound it before maybe a royal decree was going to be announced. It could be a sign to mobilize because of an attack, but it was to alert people. And many a person has wondered what would the heavenly trumpet sound like, and to really live with a sense of anticipation that at any moment that trumpet could sound, and suddenly everything that'll be very clear in that moment. For believers will, if they've been paying any attention at all, realize what this must indicate. And it says that from the elect, those that belong to God, basically, from the four winds will be taken up, and he'll gather them. And so the book of 1st and 2nd Thessalonians talks a bit about that, to say that those that have already died will be resurrected first, and then they, along with those who are on the earth at the time, will be taken up. And so Jesus is kind of laying out the fundamental process of how that happens. Things will get worse and worse, he says, and then ultimately they'll be to the point where even in the cosmos there'll be all kinds of enormous signs taking place, and then the end will come. And so he gets down to verse 32, and now he's kind of explained the process, and then just some lessons, some things, some takeaways for us. It says, learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. And of course, that's quite in many ways, has been a very intriguing, confusing statement by Jesus, because he's just described the end times, and then he turns around and says, all the people here, this generation will not pass away until all this has happened. So that, that would mean that everything Jesus was talking about happened in the first century, and clearly, hopefully, he hasn't come back yet, and we're still hanging around here.
Yeah.
And so that is a bit of a mystery, and yet, of course, as we saw earlier, Jesus had said that these end times are like birth pains, and so he was saying, when it comes to things like false prophets, false messiahs, antichrists, wars and rumors of wars, he was saying basically those things they're already happening, but they're just going to become more intense. And so it may well be, I guess the way I would probably interpret this is to say, Jesus is saying all of these signs, you can see them now, but the key, to the mystery is the intensity, the frequency. And so, they are happening now. That generation saw all those things, but they're going to get worse. They'll be more global around the world and so on.
And certainly there was that, because of the sort of the sacking of Jerusalem, 30 years after he's saying this.
Yeah.
I think probably a lot of the early church would look at that and say, okay, this seems to be it.
Yeah.
Right? Like this seems to be.
And in their lifetime, that would have been absolutely catastrophic, to watch Jerusalem itself all just destroyed, the temple destroyed, many people butchered in the streets. And Jesus had said, when you see that, flee to the mountains. And so
don't even get your coat, just get out of there.
So many Christians had done that, and so a lot of Christians' lives were spared because they heeded what Jesus had said. So certainly a lot of what Jesus has said in this chapter will happen by 70 AD. And so they could say, in our lifetime, our generation, these things have happened, but it's not the end yet. And I guess one thing we've learned just from history is, you think things can't get any worse, and then you realize, no, this has been bad, but there's more to come. There's other things still to happen, and it is encouraging. Verse 35: heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The Bible never becomes outdated, archaic, out of touch, unscientific, or whatever else. And then just I think an important part. Begin verse 36, it says, now concerning that day and hour, no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, except the Father alone. And you see here kind of a hierarchy of authority, where even the Son says, I don't even know when I'm coming back, but the Father. And what the Bible always portrays is that the God the Father is always the one that is in charge, the one that has the plan, that sets the timetable. Jesus implements the plan. He's the one that does the work, if you will, and then the Holy Spirit is the one that is always taking the work of Jesus and implementing it into believers' lives. And so Jesus,
which this will maybe be another epic miniseries, but that raises all sorts of questions about the Trinity.
Yeah,
right. And it's like, but I thought these were all one.
Yeah,
and it's like, but yet there is this obvious distinction and hierarchy within the Trinity, which, and
yet they're one person, and yet they're expressed in three persons, but one God. And so you've got three persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, with each a very distinctive role. And of course, I think to be a Trinitarian Christian, you've got to be able to know how to relate to each of the persons of the Trinity, because they all have things to bring to bear. And so, that might well be something we dig into. But it says even Jesus doesn't know that. So whenever anyone writes a book and tells you they do know the hour, of course, you realize, well, if Jesus doesn't know the hour, I'm guessing this author doesn't either. They haven't. Yeah. If Jesus can't figure out the key to the mystery, then probably we're not going to either. And it says, as the days of Noah were, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. For in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day Noah boarded the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them all away. This is the way the coming of the Son of Man will be. So I think just importantly to recognize Jesus, because we're going to come up into some verses that some people will use to justify a secret rapture. But what Jesus is, this whole section is all about that we don't know when this is. It's a mystery. All you can do is be ready for it. And so it says that as in the days of Noah, they were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, and so on, until the day Noah boarded the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them all away. And so he says, this is the way that the coming of the Son of Man will be. So, in other words, you won't expect it. People will be living out their life thinking they've got lots of time, just like the people in Noah's day. They had no sense of the looming judgment that was coming. And so they're having parties, they're planning out their summer holidays, everything just like normal, and suddenly it starts raining. And so Jesus was saying, in the same way, people will be carrying out their life as if they've got all the time in the world, and suddenly Jesus will return. And basically, he will catch them by surprise. So you get to verse 40, it says, then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding grain with a handmill. One will be taken and one left. Therefore, be alert, since you don't know what day the Lord is coming. And so some people have sort of pictured this as a secret rapture, but the whole point is not that the point is not that you're out working with someone and suddenly the Christians are all gone and the non-Christians are left in the field and they're all wondering what happened. This whole point is that there'll be people who aren't ready when Jesus returns, and so. There'll be 2 women grinding grain. One will be ready to be taken, one won't be. So it just says one will be taken and one will be left. And so 2 men in the field, one will be taken, one will be left. And And so, again, sometimes you read this and you think, oh, this is the secret rapture where, the wife wakes up in the morning and the husband's no longer in bed with her because he's been secretly raptured. But that's not really what this is talking about. This is here, at least, Jesus is just simply saying no one knows when he's going to return, but when he does, there'll be some who are ready, and so they'll be taken, and there'll be others who aren't ready, and so they won't be taken. And so he kind of wraps up that section and says, this is why you are also to be ready, because the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. And so the whole point is just readiness. And I think as leaders, as Christians today, he's saying, don't put off till tomorrow something you already know that God wants you to do, because you're not promised tomorrow. And how tragic that might be if Jesus returned and we had planned on getting our life straightened out. We planned on obeying what God told us to do. And I don't know. I mean, I think if you're a believer, you're going to end up in heaven anyway. But could it cost other people because we didn't? God was putting someone on our heart, and we planned on ministering to them or witnessing to them, but we hadn't done it yet. And now Jesus returns, and so there is a sense in which some of the Christians who've had the greatest impact on history have been the people that lived in the shadow of Jesus' return. And because you don't know when he's returning, you don't want any unfinished business. And I think a great goal for Christians is to keep very short accounts with the will of God. And so once you know what God, of course, that doesn't mean that you don't put money away for retirement or you don't pay off your mortgage, because it might be that he doesn't come in our lifetime, and if so, we want to be good stewards. But on the other hand, if there's some things we can take care of today, we don't just keep pushing things off to another time, because in a moment Jesus could return, and then it'll be too late to finish up those things that God had wanted us to do in our lifetime. And so he kind of wraps it up in verse 45 and says, "Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his master has put in charge of his household, to give them food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom the master finds doing his job when he comes. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all of his possessions. But if that wicked servant says in his heart, 'My master is delayed,' and starts to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with drunkards, that servant's master will come on a day he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." And it's kind of interesting when it talks about weeping and gnashing of teeth, and he says that's a place of hypocrites, people that said the right things but didn't live the right way, the people that had the words but not the deeds. And you can tell from here that Jesus doesn't have a high view of that kind of person. And so we get to the end of this chapter, and I think it's just very important. To me, it's the base camp, the bedrock of the biblical view of the last days, of Jesus' return. And if you just kind of summed it all up, you would say that things are going to get worse. There'll be all kinds of deceivers, of false teachers. There'll be wars, rumors of wars, famines, and so on. But the two things that we kind of highlighted in this series, one is that they're going to keep on getting worse. And so, those things are all happening even among the disciples of Jesus. They could point to wars and rumors of wars, but they're going to get worse. And ultimately, at the end, even the heavens will be affected, and there'll be cosmic kinds of incredible things happening that the whole world is talking about and noticing. And those are signs that we're getting closer. The end is near, because even all of nature is starting to come, in a sense, unwound as well. And then the other thing we saw earlier is that it says that all the nations will hear basically the gospel will be made available to all peoples. And it doesn't mean all peoples will believe, but it means that the gospel will have finally, the Great Commission will have at least made it and the gospel be presented to all peoples. And so it would appear that we're getting very, very close to that, where at least every people group has had access to the gospel. And if that's what that means, then that would be an indication that we are much, much closer to the end than we've ever been before. And then it says when things almost got to the point of being unbearable, there'll be a certain moment when no one expects. And at that moment, Jesus will return. And the tragedy will be that there will be those that perhaps had planned to become a Christian, had planned to get right with God, had planned to do things that they knew God wanted them to do, but they assumed they had more time. And then suddenly their time is done. And there'll be those that are taken, there'll be those left behind. And that what a tragic thought. And I think in part, God knows how tragic that will be, that whenever he brings an end to history, then that's it. There's no more opportunity. And that may well be why he's delayed for 2,000 years. He keeps giving people an opportunity. And there's some that there's some people that kind of hold that that God perhaps has some kind of goal for heaven. Perhaps he wants a certain number of people there worshiping before the throne, or maybe he wants people from every tribe, nation, corner of the earth represented in heaven. But we'll understand one day why God chose not to come back sooner, that at least 2,000 years have passed. And of course, as Peter says, 1,000 years is like one day to God. So in God's economy, he's only waited 2 days to come back. It's a lot longer for us, obviously, but for him, it's not that much time has passed yet. And so if he comes back, in the next 100 years, that will be like a 2-day absence. And so the key for us, I think, is be ready. Keep short accounts and live your life in anticipation that for all we know, Jesus could return before the end of today. And if he did, would the first thought be, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd taken care of that. And now the time is done. So I think just a great way to live your life is always in the shadow of Jesus' return and the sound of the trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, it's too late. At that point, our time here on earth is done. And so be ready, because one day, it might be in our lifetime, the trumpet will sound, and we'd better, by that point, have finished the work that God has given us to do.
Well, it's a great challenge, sobering reminder, and I appreciate you walking us through this epic mini-series on leading in the end times.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.